What's going on, everyone? Thanks so much for tuning in to another episode of the Ducks Dish podcast. I'm your host, Max Torres, the ScoopDuck on 3. It is Tuesday, October 29th, 2024, and we got another awesome episode of the pod for you guys today as number one Oregon gears up for a road trip out to Ann Arbor, Michigan to take on the Michigan Wolverines. That game is Saturday, 12:30 p.m. on CBS. So we'll talk about some Ducks, some of our thoughts heading into that game early on the week here, and then a little bit of recruiting talk as well, because we can't go an episode. We don't usually go an episode without talking about recruiting, so don't expect that to start just now. And joining me to break it all down is ScoopDuck owner and publisher Justin Hopkins. How we doing, J Hop?
Doing great. Tuesday, rocking and rolling, and just kind of really, I'm quite honestly anxious to see Oregon play Michigan in Ann Arbor this weekend. I think it's going to be a fun game, good game, and I'm excited to talk about it a little bit.
And I think this will be the first game. You can correct me if I'm wrong. I think this is the first game between these two teams in Ann Arbor since Dennis Dixon had that famous Statue of Liberty play all those years ago.
Yep, yeah, that is correct. So I think I posted the question on the ScoopDuck message boards, like, hey, who's going to Ann Arbor this weekend and who went the last time. So it was just kind of interesting to read some of those responses, and just kind of to my surprise, there was a lot of people that are making the return trip.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, we'll break down some of our latest updates that we got from Oregon head coach Dan Lanning on Monday evening. But before we get into that, I want to make sure you guys know that we are running a flash sale over at scoopduck.com. You can try us out for 7 days for just $1, and that will roll directly into 50% off an annual membership. So great time to try us out. Ducks are hot, number one team in the country. And as we all know, things are heating up on the recruiting trail as Dan Lanning and this coaching staff try to tie a nice little bow on this 2025 recruiting class, which ranks number 7 nationally last I checked, according to On3, and number 2 in the Big Ten. So great time to check us out. Definitely a lot of fun over there. We have a very active message board, and Justin and I are always chatting with our subscribers. So it's a fun time. Definitely recommend that you guys check us out over there. But let's get into some more of this game, Justin. I think the two most notable updates, which aren't really, there's not a lot of substance there, but Terrence Ferguson and Jordan Birch are kind of listed as questionable for Saturday's game out there in Ann Arbor, but they were available to practice. Lanning added on Monday evening. So what do you make of that? And how do you think the Ducks are doing kind of at their respective positions there?
Yeah, the quick reports from, and again, quick, media is allowed, like 15, 20 minutes tops at practices. And Lanning has opened practice back up this week, Tuesday and Wednesday, which has been the normal routine, although last week he closed it all week. But anyways, as we're recording this moments ago, basically media concluded their open viewing period. Both Birch and Ferguson were there in pads and warming up. So you take from that what you will. Is it gamesmanship? And again, keep in mind, this is the first 15, 20 minutes of practice. So it's not like they're out there banging around or tackling guys to the ground or getting tackled to the ground. They're warming up. So, you take from that what you will. I guess more importantly, how about this? Great players, and Oregon would love to have them back. Oregon will be just fine without them. I mean, that's how I view it. I mean, if they're able to play for Michigan, that's great. You want to be at full strength. If they're not, you're not going to see me hitting the panic button. Oregon's going to be just fine. Obviously, we saw Kenyon Sadiq fill in quite well. And then we know the bevy of defensive linemen. Mateo has done well. Tatum, Tuioti, Winston, all those guys are getting reps out there and making the most of it in place of Jordan Birch. So maybe they play, maybe they don't. I'm going to guess that they don't, but we'll see.
I think with Jordan Birch, that's a position that Oregon, I think, is more equipped to kind of navigate that absence for right now. And they have a lot of really talented guys in that room and more guys that are getting snaps and quality reps with each week. Tight end, I think it's not quite the case there. We have been seeing more and more of Kenyon Sadiq, which I absolutely love, Justin. He's just a different type of athlete in that room. And I don't think you necessarily think that you need Terrence Ferguson to get this done, given Michigan's struggles so far this year. But how about Patrick Herbert? He had a couple of really important plays in that game last week that I think were pretty pivotal. So nice to see him getting a little bit of action, a little bit of run there. And I think that you feel confident about where that group is at. But if you're able to kind of get someone like, I guess, Roger Saliapaga more involved, he seems like the guy in that from that 2024 class that are now true freshmen that Drew Maringer feels a little bit more confident about. Maybe he's a little bit more game ready. He also had, I think he had the big onside recovery in the Ohio State game. So it's exciting to see those guys get some action and get on the field early. And Saliapaga is one that's making his impact felt already.
Yeah, all those guys are great. I think we said this on the earlier pod this week. The Kenyon Sadiq thing's kind of been like this experiment that really hasn't worked out until last week. I thought last week it obviously paid dividends. There were some big gains, did well there. So I feel good about the tight end room. And frankly, as fans, you really have to stop looking at this as a game by game situation and start looking at the big picture. And the big picture is obviously making the college football playoff, being as healthy as you can be for those. You do need to win the games along the way. That's not lost on me. But I mean, it feels like if Oregon can blast number 20 Illinois minus those guys, you still feel pretty good about their chances of going to Ann Arbor and beating Michigan without them potentially.
And you spoke a little bit earlier here in the show, Justin, about how practices are back open for the Oregon media out there in Eugene. And I've been to a lot of those practices in my time covering the Ducks. So there's not exactly a lot that you're missing, not necessarily groundbreaking stuff coming out of there, but it's obviously nice to be around the players. Just to go big picture for a second, I'm sure Oregon fans will have fun talking about this in the comments. One program that is not allowing media access is USC. As that report came out on Monday, that Lincoln Riley has shut practices for the remainder of the season, not just 1 week, J-Hop. No one's getting looks at them, at least for the remainder of the regular season. I don't know if that decision goes into a possible postseason or whatever extra games you have, maybe a bowl game for USC. But what did you make of that one?
Panic. It just reeks of panic. It's no secret that I'm not the biggest Lincoln Riley fan. I questioned the hire when it was initially made. Do I think he's a great offensive mind? Absolutely. I will not debate that. Do I think he does well with quarterbacks? Again, absolutely. Those are his strengths. He does an incredible job there. But we both know that running a football team is so much more than recruiting a quarterback and running an offense, right? And so if you look at USC's roster composition, if you look at the way they're recruiting, a lot of these things that basically raise some flags, it just looks like panic to me. And frankly, it's not going to make USC a better team. I mean, that's just my short answer on it.
It was a weird decision, and I think I'm not surprised by it, because I think one of the other things that's just been very strange for me, I don't know if it's happened all season, but I know it's happened, I'm pretty sure, in every loss. Justin, I want to get your thoughts here. Lincoln Riley sitting in on the press conferences with his players after these just brutal, gut-wrenching losses. I don't know if that's to show camaraderie or, being a team, we're all in this together kind of a thing. But I think that he had one of those press conferences where he or Miller Moss or somebody was getting asked something, and he kind of cut the reporter off like, hey, don't ask that. I don't know if you recall that, but just weird vibes around that SC program right now.
Yeah, no, the vibe is weird. And, what were they? They were ranked top 10, I think, when we started the preseason. USC was, or no, they weren't. Then they beat LSU and they suddenly shot up the rankings. And it feels like that LSU win's been a lifetime ago. It doesn't even feel like it's been from this season. So that'd be an interesting rematch there. Not that LSU is any good, because they really aren't. But yeah, there's like I said, there's a lot of things that go into leading a program of that caliber, leading a program of Oregon's caliber. And it certainly looks like Lincoln Riley is leaving a lot to be desired in a lot of these areas outside of where I outlined his strengths.
So let's get back to this Oregon-Michigan game. I don't want to get too sidetracked here, Justin, but if there's one thing I know about Duck fans, other than that they love Oregon, they love to sip on the USC tears and anything, any dysfunction down in Southern California where I'm at. So let's get back to this matchup. Let's talk about kind of what catches our eye here, what we're kind of looking at. I know we have the opposing players we're most concerned about. Roundtable coming out later on ScoopDuck today. For me, I think where I am most drawn to in this matchup is Oregon's offensive line versus Michigan's defensive front, because you have some absolute ballers on that defensive front. Mason Graham, Kenneth Grant, Josiah Stewart, just guys across the board that I think are probably, I think, a little bit better than that Ohio State front that Oregon faced earlier on this season, or at the very least on par with what the Buckeyes brought out to Eugene for that game. So that this looks like, I think, probably Oregon's biggest test at the line of scrimmage, maybe for the remainder of the regular season.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned those. They're dudes. Like, I mean, I won't debate that. That's the strength of their team. It's the strength of their defense. And Michigan, I know it's probably, obviously it's not been the season that they hope to have given what happened last year, but they're still a very physical and talented team on the line of scrimmage. I mean, that's probably, and it's going to make for a really interesting game against Ohio State in a few weeks, but no reason to get into that. Oregon, like you said, the offensive line is going to have to do a good job, because whether or not Will Johnson plays, and I did just post, Sharon Moore's media interview from Monday, and he gave the Dan Lanning response like, "Hey, I'm going to leave it up to the doctors. I don't know," but he did basically indicate he would be back this year. That was the only statement he would give, on that. So in terms of that, I think if Michigan doesn't have Will Johnson, my point is, I think it will be a little bit easier for that Oregon offensive line to make some holes, because the defense will be off balance, right? They won't be able to just pin their ears back and get after the quarterback, or pin their ears back and get upfield after the running backs. They're going to have to do a little bit more to help, the lack of experience they have at cornerback and defensive back. So that's kind of the game within the game, right? Obviously Oregon's offensive line, they've got to create some lanes. We got to see Jordan James and Noah Whittington run the ball. That's going to be it right there. If Oregon can establish the run and effectively run the football, the game is over. Like, I really don't care about anything else. Obviously, there's turnovers, there's penalties. We could talk about that. We could talk about that every week. If Oregon can effectively run the football in Michigan, it's going to be a long day for the Wolverines.
And that's the other story that I think we can also look at here, Justin. We talked about the Michigan defensive front and how they're talented as you'll find in the country, but Michigan State was able to run the ball pretty well on them last week in a narrow 24-17 rivalry win for the Wolverines over Jonathan Smith and the Michigan State Spartans. The Spartans carried 42 times for 163 yards and 1 touchdown on the ground, averaging 3.9 yards per carry. Lead back Nate Carter had 118 yards and 6.2 yards a pop. So I think Michigan's maybe looking a little bit vulnerable on the ground defending the run. And conversely, on Oregon's side, I think they are picking up steam running the ball, because like we talked about, Noah Whittington's return, Noah Whittington's ascension in the 2024 season as he bounces back from that knee injury that cut his year short last season. I think that this Oregon backfield is looking even more deadly, and you really hope with Noah Whittington taking on a potentially larger role that you can take some of that load off of Jordan James's shoulders in a game like this.
Yeah, balance will be key, right? Being able to balance those two guys, and just really ultimately you want to feel like, if you're Coach Samples, Coach Stein, whatever, you want to feel like there's no drop off, right? Like, okay, we got Jordan James out there and he's feasting. Let's give Noah some run and give Jordan a break. You just hope it's not like, hey, Jordan's up here and Noah's down here. And it's kind of been that way up until this last week. I just don't think Noah was quite there. And obviously this last week, he turned that around. He turned it on. And now all of a sudden you're like, okay, they're both up here. We're good. Let's get one of those guys out there and let them eat. And, that's it. That's the key to this offense versus their defense, is just the fact that, you want to keep them back. You don't want them to be able to just creep to the line of scrimmage because they don't fear to throw. But you also, you want to push them back because they have to fear to throw, so they can't just clog the run lane. So, making the defense kind of be off balance is where Oregon will win. And you got to establish the run to do that. If you're simply dinking and dunking the whole way down the field, sooner or later they're going to drop back and fill in those lanes, and it's going to make it really tough. So Will Stein needs to be balanced. He needs to stay committed to the run, even if it's not there early. He needs to stay committed to the run, use the pass to push him back, and then get back into the run. And this game has the potential to be over by halftime, because Michigan, obviously, they're not going to start Orgy. They're going to start Davis Warren this week at quarterback, which I believe is now their fourth quarterback change, right? They started with Tuttle, and I think they went to Warren, and then they went to Orgy. Now they're back to Warren. I don't know. Pretty close there. So, anyways, it's a quarterback carousel. On offense, Michigan is not built to come back. So I don't care which quarterback's back there. If they get down by 14 or 21, this thing could get real ugly real quick.
You took the next storyline right away from me, Justin. It's the quarterback carousel out in Ann Arbor, which has really been a huge storyline around this Michigan team. And just kind of pulling it up here. So Davis Warren has played in 4 games. Jack Tuttle has played in 2. Alex Orgy in 7. And the other surprise story, perhaps, Justin, Jack Tuttle announced his retirement from college football this week to prioritize his health. So you never knock a guy for that. We all know football's a dangerous game, and you got to look at the big picture. I remember he was a pretty prized recruit coming out of high school. I think he spent some time at Utah, and I thought that was a really good addition for them at the time, but hasn't really come together with the Wolverines so far this year. But yeah, I think obviously Michigan looks shaky given the lack of consistency at quarterback, and you think if Oregon can shut down the run and run the ball, that is the pretty basic game plan here. For some reason, I don't know why I'm thinking about this, but it reminds me of this last week's 49ers versus Cowboys game, because I'm a Niner fan. Everybody knows that by now, hopefully. The Cowboys couldn't run the ball and they couldn't stop the run, so that's what the Niners had to do. Not saying that Michigan can't run the ball. They definitely can, but it definitely feels like they are one-dimensional at best on offense, but you can't put it by him. That's why Dan Lanning and the Ducks are locked in. He was asked about the game on Monday, and he said, "Hey, we have an opportunity to play the defending national champions." So that's not something he's taking lightly, and you got to expect Oregon to be locked in again.
Well, and I know my man Core Patty pulled up a stat. I mean, Michigan hasn't lost the game at home since 2020, which was, I believe, the COVID season. So, I mean, at home, Michigan's good. And, of course, obviously, they won a national championship last year, and they were good. Ohio State's been the one that probably has had the best shot to beat them, and clearly Ryan Day hasn't gotten that done so far. So, it's a tough place to play. There's a ton of history. It's a huge stadium. They're going to be loud, so expect that. And so, yeah, there's a lot of things there. But again, if you're Oregon defensively in this one, obviously you want to get after the quarterback and make him uncomfortable. You want to do all you can to really slow down that run, especially on the early downs, on first down, second down, so that you put them in an obvious third down passing situation, because that's when Oregon's defense will feast. And again, yeah, you said it, and I a tip of the cap to Jack Tuttle. I am sure that was not an easy decision for him to retire, but 5 concussions is what he claimed prompted that for him to retire. And by all means, if that was my kid, I would fully support that decision. So obviously, you wish the best to him. And now Sharon Moore's kind of left with 2 in the carousel instead of 3, trying to figure out, what the saying goes, if you have 2 quarterbacks, you have none in most cases. So, that's what happens if you're kind of going back and forth on your quarterbacks during the season. You're basically trying to figure out which one's the best of the worst. So, and I don't think Davis Warren's a bad quarterback. I just think inexperienced. And obviously when you keep going back and forth on those weeks that you're not the number 1 guy, those are reps that you're not getting with the first team. So it makes it really tough, but we'll see how it plays out this week.
Before we get into a little bit of recruiting talk here on a Tuesday morning, Justin, let's take a quick break to give a shout out to one of our sponsors here on the show, and that is Ranchito Grill in Springfield. Not sure what your dinner plans are, but head on over to Ranchito at 1537 Mohawk Boulevard. Give their homemade tortillas a try. They got great food, a great environment, and they will take care of you. Say what's up to my guy, Ruben, and let him know that Max Torres sent you. Max Torres, Justin Hopkins here with you on the Ducks Dish podcast with some big recruiting updates to get into. None are bigger than 2025 tight end Vander Plug, a verbal commitment to Washington. Justin, he was back in Eugene this past weekend for his official visit with Oregon. Didn't waste any time, just less than 2 weeks, really, or I guess you could say exactly 2 weeks since his last trip. He was in town for the Ohio State game. We got interviews with Vander Plug on that visit up on the site right now. But the biggest update, Justin, you and I, Steve Wiltfong, and I think Chad Simmons as well, flooding in our on-3 RPM predictions for Oregon to flip Vander Plug from the rival Huskies.
Yeah, great player, great athlete. It's a guy that, again, I know we've talked about him, so I'll keep it brief. But I mean, Oregon's had a finger on his recruitment back into the spring, so it's not like just a guy that blew up with a big September at his local high school, and Oregon's like, oh, we better start talking to this guy. They've been talking for a while, obviously since he had committed to Washington, but I recall in the spring he was very high on Oregon, like dream school kind of high. And so these visits, I think, support that. And obviously, you've heard enough, I've heard enough, Chad and Steve have heard enough to kind of consider this one in Oregon's favor. And we know the Ducks want to take two tight ends in this cycle. They would love to take two prep tight ends if it works out. We know they're working on other names as well. So if you can get Plug, committed and kind of move forward there, it probably makes life a bit easier for Drew Maringer, maybe trying to work on Lincoln Cure, trying to work on Andrew Olesh to find that second guy. But really like Plug. I know he's had a great senior year. And I think, obviously you steal one from the Huskies, which is great. But this would, if this guy was uncommitted, it would still be a good pickup for Oregon.
He's a tremendous player, Justin. 3-sport athlete, 6'6", 215, 220 pounds. I'm actually planning to go to his game on Friday. Troy against El Toro, I think, is the other school. So always excited to hit the road and get some more recruiting coverage for our ScoopDuck subscribers. But this would be a great addition if they're able to pull it off. It does give me the feeling of one that's going to happen sooner rather than later. I know getting him on campus, getting back to campus, I should say, for him with his family was a huge part of this process. He was telling me in the interview there who I do it for. So Ducks are moving quickly here with Vander Plug. I think he's the guy that we are kind of watching the closest right now. But like you mentioned, Justin, Lincoln Cure, Andrew Olesh, those two other tight end names worth monitoring here in the 2025 class. Cure committed to Kansas State and Olesh committed to Michigan. I believe he's heading to Penn State for the Ohio State game this weekend. So lots of stuff to track, but any other recruiting kind of tidbits or nuggets that you wanted to throw out here while we're still on?
Just, Andrew Olesh, again, making another visit. So as we talked about, Oregon would like to get two tight ends. So you're looking at Andrew Olesh and Lincoln Cure. And neither one's going to be easy, right? Obviously, Olesh committed to Michigan. Obviously, Cure is committed to Kansas State. Both of those programs, much closer proximity to where they live now than Oregon. And, the one thing that does scare me about both of them is that Oregon's the outlier. If you look at Cure, in the case, it's Kansas State and it's Oregon. I don't think he's really talking to anybody else. Obviously, one program's a lot farther than the other. And if you look at it, Andrew Olesh, the Michigan commit, he's looking heavily at Penn State. I know Notre Dame's kind of clawing back into it. And then there's Oregon. So obviously you look at those three schools over here and Oregon's over here. So to me, those are things that I look at just from doing this for 15 years. And it doesn't mean, the end all, but, maybe Oregon only gets Vander Plug. What do they do? Well, they could probably go to the transfer portal. They're on some top names in 2026 early on at the tight end position. So it's not panic, but that's kind of where that's at. And, of course, I think next, the obvious person to talk about is Jaron Kiava Sagapolatele, the quarterback from Hawaii, committed to Cal, visited Oregon as well with Plug this past weekend. Really good player. I don't think anybody's put a flip prediction in for him just yet.
I mean, you and I have, right?
I don't remember. We did Plug. Did we do Jaron? Yeah, we did Jaron like a couple weeks ago, huh? Yeah.
Yeah, I think we did it after they offered. It was kind of just like you and I were both feeling good about that one.
It feels like a formality at this point, I'll be honest. And I think all we're currently kind of waiting on there is if he does make that Georgia trip, which he's talked about doing, and if it's enough for Georgia to be in the mix. Again, I think that's going to be a long shot for the Bulldogs. I think he's Oregon's to lose at this moment, and he's had a killer senior year. So I know a lot of people will kind of gloss over this, but I really like this kid.
I like him a lot too. And just so you guys know, we also have an interview with him over on ScoopDuck. So we got all these guys covered, and you definitely want to check it out. He's got a great story. He's an awesome kid, 6'3", 215, 220. He's built, great character. His mom was able to make the trip with him from Hawaii. So the Ducks did everything right on that visit. And like you said, Justin, I think that Georgia trip, we got to see if it ends up happening or not. But Oregon's, I think, in the driver's seat here to flip one of the top quarterbacks in the country, a guy who's been a riser for us over at On3 since making his commitment to Cal, I believe. So he's a standout. It feels like Oregon's heating up here on the recruiting trail, and we have all of it covered for you guys over at ScoopDuck On3. So, Justin, I know you got a jet, so maybe this is a good place to wrap up for today.
Yeah, can do. I think one thing we should mention real quick is actually we should mention two things real quick, and we'll do it. Jakeem Stewart, the 4-star defensive lineman that converted from 26 to 25, recently visited Oregon. I know Steve Wiltfong was on YouTube today with Josh Newberg saying that he thinks Oregon leads. I've been pretty vocal. I think we agree. I've been vocal saying Oregon is at worst in the top 2, and I could see Oregon leading. They got to get him back on campus. I think you and I agree with that. So Oregon's going to have to get him back on campus. And last thing, and I'll toss it to you since I just did all the talking there. You were at Mater Dei St. John Bosco Friday night. I know you interviewed Chris Henry, Daniel Odom, some others. Kind of what did you see? And I know the game. Don't talk about the game because it's a freaking blowout, which we all know. But what did you kind of see from the Oregon commits and maybe Chris Henry a little bit there?
Yes, great call. Sorry about that. Just trying to be mindful of the time for you. Yeah, so I was at that game. Not much of a game to report on. It was a blowout, but the Oregon commits did their thing. I think Jordan Davison had a touchdown. Nasir Wyatt was wrecking havoc along with Tamohini Tapoy. Nasir had a scoop and score on a strip sack, so he's just an electric guy. What I thought was interesting from him, and I wrote this over on the site, he was talking about, hey, I think we got some flips coming. And then also just talk to him a bit more about the plan for him at Oregon, because he is a bit of a tweener when you look at his build, probably like 6'2", between that 205, 215 range right now. He talked about Oregon maybe wanting to get him up to like 240, 250, but then he also said 230 could even be cool. So he seems like he's really, it's like a mysterious kind of idea for what's going to happen with him at Oregon, but they kind of see him maybe in that Tatum Tuioti type of role. But again, he's 255, so I don't really know kind of where I see this guy, at the next level. I think he obviously has some special burst and speed, quickness off the edge, but I feel like he might end up being more of a stand-up linebacker. Maybe you try to move him in the middle. I'm not really sure. So he's an awesome athlete. Daniel Odom was another one that I just wrote about. He's over on the site right now. Oregon, he really likes Oregon. I just wonder I think Madden Williams might be the bigger priority for the Ducks there at wide receiver if you're just looking at St. John Bosco here in the 2026 class. But Oregon's commits did great, and just exciting time for the Ducks right now.
And Chris Henry.
Chris Henry, yep, continues to have a lot of communication with the Ducks. Dan Lanning and Junior Adams are constantly in his ear. He kind of told me, hey, wouldn't be surprised if I make it back out to Oregon for another game this year. Only trip on the schedule for him right now is Ohio State versus Michigan in late November. Of course, he's nursing one of his knee injuries that he got. That cut his season completely short. It was his knee and his hamstring. So just a brutal break for the number one wideout in the country, but expect Oregon to be involved there moving forward with the Ohio State commit.
It sounds like it's just those two, right? I mean, is he really even talking about anybody else? Just kind of those two?
Yeah, I asked him about that. I said, hey, any other schools kind of worth a mention here in your recruitment, Chris? And he mentioned some of the SEC schools that you kind of hear everybody talking about. It was Alabama. I'm trying to pull this up on the fly here.
Georgia, Bama, Texas, probably, yeah.
Alabama. I think he even threw USC out there as well as one to watch. So I thought that was interesting. Alabama, Texas, Tennessee. Those are the ones he's continuing to hear from. But I still believe that Oregon and Ohio State have the most traction there.
For sure. No, and good. And like Max has said, we offer a lot at ScoopDuck. We're obviously covering the team. I believe this is the first game all year that we don't have somebody at besides photographer. We have a photographer at the game. But as far as media, I mean, because you were at UCLA, we had Colin over at Purdue. Oregon State was obviously just up the road, so Lyndon made that. So this is the first week, I believe, that we don't have somebody present at the actual game. But we'll still cover it, and nobody brings it to you like we do. Football, recruiting, all of it together. We try not to neglect anything. And, I don't know, Max, it sounds like we're going to have to start working on basketball here pretty soon too as well.
Yeah, hoop season's getting underway, and fresh season, fresh slate for Dana Altman and the Ducks. So make sure you guys tap in with us over at ScoopDuck. If you want to find more Justin, you can follow him on Twitter/X at JHopkinsSD. You can find me anywhere at MTorres Sports. Subscribe to the YouTube channel and check us out at ScoopDuck.com. But until next time, thank you guys so much for tuning in to another episode of the Duck Dish Podcast.